I'm Norman Alerta. I'm the director of the Assessment and Evaluation Department in Cherry Creek Schools. And today we're going to talk to you about visualizing the road to college. And I'm going to have Christina introduce herself here.
So I'm Christina Ethier. I'm the manager of performance analytics at Cherry Creek School District. This is my 8th month with Norm. And the second time that he's been my boss, he was my boss in a previous school district in Colorado.
So we've been using Tableau for about 5 years, and we've gone through different things. This is actually our second time presenting. And before we move forward with this, I actually want to acknowledge somebody in this room. So Stephanie Henry was our former analyst, senior data assessment analyst in our district. And I started talking about, getting National Student Clearinghouse data. And I don't know if anyone here from a K-12 district has subscribed to National Student Clearinghouse.
Yeah.
You get those reports, they're PDF reports, they're very static bar graphs. And I kept saying, we need to start visualizing this with Tableau. So I initially came up with this. I got some geocodes related to the addresses of the schools. And I started playing around with the map. And then a couple years ago, I handed it over to Stephanie. She kind of did some other things with it. So what we're sharing with you today is the latest iteration of our work of taking some student data from National Student Clearinghouse, connecting it with local data, and then presenting some reports for that. So today we'll give you a little more introduction about who we are and what we do, and then go into a little bit of designing that road to college, and then how we're actually visualizing that, and then show you a little demo of a workbook that we currently have put together. And we'll do as much as possible to save about 15 minutes for Q&A. Christina bet me a steak dinner that I'm not going to meet that standard because, first of all, I already experienced some techno problems, and I do tend to talk a lot.
Yes, he's chatty.
Yeah, so we'll speed ourselves along here. So who we are and what we do. This is me and my family on the far left side, as you guys are looking at it. And this is just to kind of set some context for us. So spring of 2018, my daughter graduated from Cherry Creek High School in our school district. And Christina, want to share a little bit about what that is?
On the right, this is my fraternity house. I mean, my husband and my 2 sons. So my oldest son graduated from preschool in May and was getting ready to transition to kindergarten. And of course, my little guy, who was 18 months at the time, only has a death stare for the camera. So
I told Christina that picture on the right becomes that picture on the left very quickly. So just in the last few months, this is where we're at. So on the left is, again, my family, and this is our daughter, a picture of our daughter on move-in day. So I asked her as we're going through this process of looking for a school, I said, do you want to stay in Colorado or do you want to go out of state? And she said, out of state. So I said, okay, let's look at Creighton, which is right there in Nebraska. And then we looked and she didn't like it. We went to Chicago. She kind of liked it a bit because there's a nice big city. And then we went all the way out to New York. And she said, this is where I want to be. So she picked the furthest away that she can be from us. So that was her road to college.
Yep. And then on the left is Thomas and I on the first day of kindergarten at Swigert International School, which is in Denver, where we live. And it was really, really different from Norm's experience of having to kind of let Drew release and let her launch. I picked the school.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when we said our goodbye to our daughter, she did not even cry. She was like, see you later. And she's in a good situation. I mean, we went through a lot of, again, we looked at a lot of places, and, for her it was the right field, right? She said what she was looking for was something near a big city, New York City, something small. It's half the size of her high school. I think her high school was 88 acres, and then Sarah Lawrence was only 42. So she was complaining about having to walk from her dorm to the post office, and I said, man, this is half the size of your school. Your old school. It's like walking from the East Wing to the West Wing. But that experience just kind of took us through a lot. But she's happy where she's at. She has nice roommates. She swims on the swim team. I'll share a little bit about that later. And she has the classes that she loves. Yeah. Okay. So who we are as a district, we're the fourth largest school district. Cherry Creek Schools is the fourth largest school district in Colorado, about a little over 55,000 students. We have about 60 schools, and we have different school options. We added a charter last year. We're actually in the process of reviewing another charter school application this year. We do have a K-8 magnet, and then we have one alternative high school. Helps our students graduate if they're not doing so well in their neighborhood schools. Demographic-wise, we have about, more than half of our students are white.
Yeah, we've historically been a majority white district, though the trend lines are merging.
Yeah, so we actually have some graphics.
Oh, I'm sorry, I scooped them.
No, well, she said she was going to put in this graphic that shows how we're projecting towards this in the future, in the near future, slowly moving from a mostly white district to a mostly non-white district. But again, our demographics for gender, slightly more males than females. We have about 30% of our students eligible for free and reduced lunch. 12 and 10% of our students are special ed and English language learners. Yeah. Now, I should note that our vision as a district is dedicated to excellence. And our mission is to inspire every student to think, to learn, to achieve, and to care. I don't know how that period got in there, but it should be a comma. And then our district goals are kind of noted in our badge, we call it our donut. So it's inclusive excellence and college and career preparedness and success. And when we define that, inclusive excellence is defined as raising the academic achievement of all students. Our intent is to close the gaps between the highest and lower performing students and eliminating the predictability of achievement by race, right? So when we look at our assessment data and we look at our gaps, we know where the gaps are. We know which groups are not performing as well as other groups. And then our goal of college and career preparedness and success is that our students are prepared for success in college and other post-secondary options, including voc ed, military, and the workforce. So when we measure how well we're doing as a system in relation to our goals, I think we can do pretty well of looking at inclusive excellence, right? Mm-hmm. And we do that through looking at our assessment data, right? So in Colorado, our state assessment system is called the Colorado Measures of Academic Success. And the assessments are designed to measure whether or not students are college or career ready. So there are certain benchmarks. So we track that percentage of kids who are meeting college readiness benchmarks. We also administer an ACT assessment suite. So we have an ACT Aspire assessment that we administer to students in grades 4 through 8. We administer, or 4 through 9, and then we have a pre-ACT assessment that we give in grade 10, and then we give all of our 11th graders an ACT, we call our district ACT. Now, that assessment suite really does give us some predictive value going from 4th grade all the way up to 11th grade. So we have some consistency with that. Another state test is the PSAT, SAT. That was implemented in our state a couple of years ago. So when we think about this ACT assessment suite, I had talked about this kind of connection from 4th grade all the way up to 11th grade. Mm-hmm. That's where our state assessment system falls short, right? You have CMAS that goes from 3rd grade to 8th grade, and then all of a sudden in high school it goes PSAT, SAT. So we kind of lose that alignment. So that's one way that we track preparedness, right? And we also break all this data down by the different groups. So in terms of inclusive excellence, we're able to identify where we have the gaps in achievement. We can also identify gaps in our, I don't know where this, you guys see my, yeah, there it is. We can also identify gaps in the opportunities that we have for our students by looking at our district enrollments. So what we tend to look at is the disproportionality between who's enrolled in different programs like AP, IB, who's identified for gifted programming, who's identified for IEPs. We look at that difference between who's actually the percentage of students by color who are enrolled in those programs compared to our percentage of students who are enrolled in the district overall. So when you look at a graphic like this, what you're seeing on the left side is an underrepresentation of a group within a program, and what you're seeing on the right side of those bar graphs is an overrepresentation. So we put line graphs and bar graphs together. And then we also look at preparedness by saying, do our kids graduate? A lot of systems look at graduation and completion as success. This is where we're going to have an argument here,
yes.
Right?
And this is actually why we told you a little bit about our families, is we went a couple rounds about defining what success actually means. So what is success for our kids?
So even if we graduate students or students get through our system with a GED, is that the end point for us as defining success? So we don't really know, right? Is that really what success is? So that brings us to the road to college. And this is where Christina and I had this argument, right? So
Friendly, collegial argument.
yeah, actually I think we're just critically thinking very passionately about what success is. So really what we think of, or what we know with the data that we're starting to look at, is that we can track college enrollment, right? We can say, look, we did what we're supposed to do, right? We got our kids graduated from our system, or they earned a GED, and then we're able to identify who actually enrolled in college, right? And that's good. But then the next question was, well, just because they get into college, do they actually stay, right? And so should we measure success as persistence, that they actually stay in college? And then, do we go beyond that? Do we say success is that they actually earned a degree, right? And I remember I was standing in front of a parent group, and we're talking about success, right? And they were having the same argument that they were having with me. And I threw out I just said something that was pretty facetious. I said, I don't know how success can be defined in different ways by different people, right? I mean, success could be you earn $100,000 if you graduate from our system. And one of the parents said, well, then by your definition, all of our teachers are failures. And I had no reply to that. And I was just like, oh, gosh. But we also agree that there's this black box, right? It's non-college pathways. Right. So we can track our kids with this data that we have. We can track them going into college. We can try to say, well, is success their persistence? Is success that they actually graduate? Or with these kids that we have no idea where they're going at this point, we're not able to track it, are they having success in other pathways other than college? So right now, when we talk about this data and what we're going to show you today, we're going to talk about really what's in the circle, and we're going to wish that we could be able to talk about what's in the black box sometime in the future.
Right. And so I'm just going to interject for a second.
Sure.
So we definitely know that the non-college pathway, and knowing about that, is a limitation of what we're presenting to you. That doesn't mean, though, that we're saying that those are not successful kids, right? In fact, personally, in my life, my youngest brother went the non-college pathway, and by Norm's measure of success, $100,000 a year, will be very successful in a year or two because he's an FAA certified mechanic and he'll out-earn me. So we definitely recognize that there are successes in this other non-college pathway that we can't get at currently.
Right. Yeah, and as a district, we're actually starting a whole new innovation initiative. So we're opening up a new innovation academy. And the idea is to serve students who might feel that college isn't where they want to go, right? It's not the pathway they want to take. So that if they want to go into industry like aerospace, computer science, food and nutrition, then we're designing this academy where students can take their core courses at their neighborhood schools, and in the afternoon take these classes that really get them prepared to be certificated in an industry of their choice. So there potentially will have a way to track at least the students that are going down that pathway. Okay. So speaking of pathways, we're going to talk about my daughter's road to success. So my daughter grew up in the Cherry Creek school system. We actually bought a house when my wife was pregnant, and I was just looking for a cheap house, and it turned out that the house I bought was actually in the school district. I wasn't working for Cherry Creek at the time, and I was, I heard that Cherry Creek's a pretty good school district. It is, because I work there now, but back then she started at the Holly Hills Elementary School, and then she moved on to West Middle School, did well there, and then was at Cherry Creek High School, and then now she's at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, so that's right there, kind of right at the tip of Manhattan, right above Manhattan. And so when we talk about her being prepared or successful, she got into college. Is that success? Yes, maybe. I'd say that she was successful because, this is where I'm going to brag as swim dad, she's on the swim team. This past weekend she broke the school record on the 200 fly, so I just had to work that in there and tell my wife that. So
guys,
to me, that
clap,
was
he gets
successful.
a steak dinner now.
Yeah, so, but at least I know she was prepared, right? She got into the college, she had good scores on her ACT, SAT. She wrote 2 essays. We got feedback from the college saying, it was really the essays that were very strong, right? So I could say that as she moved through our system, she was prepared. Now, whether or not she's successful, if she stays, she better, because we committed a lot of dollars so far for this first semester. And then whether or not she earns a degree, my wife will say that even if she earns a degree, she's got to get a job. And then my wife will say she was successful. And she's got to get a high-paying job. So this is kind of where we're kind of wondering, is this, how do we answer these questions, right? And with the data that we're going to share with you today, I think it just continues that conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina now, and she's going to talk about designing the data set to examine success or preparedness.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of with this framework or this lens in mind, I went about looking at the first iteration that we had of our road to college and really wondering if we could get at some of these questions that we wanted to answer. And so what we did is we did do some redesigning of our data source, and what we, just by show of hands, how many of you have ever seen the National Student Clearinghouse data? Okay, wow. Just by show of hands, how many of you actually like the way the data set is set up?
A lot of multiple rows, right? A lot of dual entries.
So it's not super fun. In a second, I have a screenshot of what it comes like from National Student Clearinghouse. So essentially, we took 5 sources. We took the National Student Clearinghouse data. We combined it with some of our state and district demographics. So in the state of Colorado, we have a mandated end-of-year reporting to the State Department of Education. And from that, I can get demographic information about each and every single student. We have some ed.gov data. We have the college scorecard, which comes from the US Department of Education. You all can go and download that data set. And then Norm found a shapefile, and then one of our super awesome IT guys also built some shapefiles for our district as well.
And the state and district data that we submit to the state actually has exit codes, right? And so the exit codes tell us who graduated or who completed.
Yep.
So when we look at this data, and the kids that go on to college, it's not just our graduates. We might have some completers, GED students, who actually go on to college.
Yep. So then the process was just really some collaboration with we call them IS, but they're our IT guys, to move our National Student Clearinghouse data into the warehouse, into our data warehouse. And then some of our state and district demographic data was already there. And then we have a fun ETL process, and here it is. So Norm is always asking me, so what's happening with the data, or what does the data look like? And so I make these schematics to show him. We take the National Student Clearinghouse data. Is this the pointer, Norm?
Yeah, the one on the top.
The one on the top.
You just have to not point it at people's eyes.
Or the cat?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the National Student Clearinghouse data on the left, top left. We move it into the data warehouse. Our state reported data comes in annually, right? So the cadence is we're actually in the next month going to get our end of year reporting for 17, 18, and it'll move into our warehouse. Then I take the data and I write some nice custom SQL where I'm unioning our K-12 enrollment records and our college enrollment records. So I got to a place where I said, hey, I'm not going to fight the way that National Student Clearinghouse gives us the data. I'm actually going to work with it. And really all I did is I unioned their high school graduation record, and our guys in IS really worked with us to create enrollment sequences. So their high school graduation record gets an enrollment sequence of 0, and then their first college enrollment sequence, their high school enrollment sequence gets a sequence of -1, If they don't go to college, they get a sequence of 0, and if they enroll ever, that first enrollment becomes 1. So it's just a sequence of enrollments then.
And if you guys aren't as familiar with the National Student Clearinghouse data, it tracks every enrollment that a student makes, right? So that first semester, first quarter, even sometimes if the kid comes back to summer and takes a summer course in their home state, then that shows up in the data set.
Yep.
So it tracks every single change of enrollment.
Yep. So his daughter Drew will show up in a month or so when we get our next.
Yeah, this month actually, November.
Yeah.
Next.
So then in Tableau, the additional data management pieces we do is we add in the iPeds or the ed.gov data, we add in the college shapefile, and then we add in the college scorecard, and those are all joined in Tableau. So this is just an example of what the National Student Clearinghouse data looks like. Do you have a question? The college shape, it's a spatial file that gives you the latitude and the longitude coordinates of each and every college or university. Yeah. Then, so you can just sort of see how this is organized. And then I write nice custom SQL, not super sexy or exciting, but gets the job done. And then these are the two kind of critical variables that I was talking about. So the enrollment sequence, which our guys in IT add in, and then the college sequence. And this one actually comes from College National Student Clearinghouse. So, and then you can see I just join in the National Student Clearinghouse tracker data to the end of year reporting. So I'm sure there are folks from other states, and I'm sure you probably have some sort of end of year reporting that's required by your state department and the federal government. Okay, so data management inside of Tableau. So I start with student enrollments, which is that custom SQL piece. Then I join in, it's all left joins, I join in the college scorecard data. I do a hex map plots because we do a hex map to kind of clean some stuff up. And then we do this funky looking named one down here is the college scorecard data. So the LU underscore SC profile to iPads is college scorecard. And then the college and university shape file, which gives the lat and longitude of each of the colleges. Okay, so visualizing the road to college and examining success. So, college enrollment, all right? We wanted to take, Norm and I started by thinking about these questions, okay? Who goes to college, right? Where do they go, and when do they go? How do I switch it, Norm?
Oh, I have no idea.
So this is,
Presentation.
yeah, put it in presentation mode. So this is our, oh, no.
Yeah.
There are a lot of switches.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, nope, that's a different one.
Nope.
Sorry, I'm just pushing buttons.
He's like my 5-year-old. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
That's the PowerPoint. Can we try it too?
Okay, so
Yep.
y'all have the other places. Because y'all are doing everything on this PowerPoint here. You taking
Uh-huh.
this out, just take
We want to show that.
you don't want to show, no, not two. What I'm saying is you take your PowerPoint down and then you take it off PowerPoint presentation.
I think what we'll do is we'll.
So it's imperfect, right? It's the best we've got. And so we have conversations when those things come up.
We'll take a presentation on it.
I think the bigger picture, though, that you see is more helpful than harmful, even with, it's kind of like assessment, right? You have a standard error of measurement, or you have some sort of, you always have some sort of noise in your measurement.
Okay.
So,
All right, I exited out of it.
Okay, cool.
sure.
Got it.
Thanks.
All right.
So this actually came up, okay, so this actually came up and I looked at it, and concurrent enrollment has not been a big program in our district historically, though I think moving forward that'll change. So we only had something like 10 kids every, so I didn't remove them, but because it was so few students, it's fine.
And it's also data that we don't do a good job of tracking. So it's one of those cases where the data sits in an Excel spreadsheet on somebody's hard drive in another department, right? So it's not something that gets into the data warehouse.
Yeah.
And that's a continued conversation that we have with IS as to what goes into data warehouse, and is it relevant to put in. And concurrent enrollment is now becoming one more relevant piece of information that we need to track. So I think moving forward, instead of going back to the PowerPoint, I think we're just going to work off of the
Great.
workbook.
Awesome. So this is our landing page. You can take a look at where, so guess what state Cherry Creek Schools is in? Anyone? So we are in Colorado. This is a spider map that shows where our students go to, and our high school students literally go all over the country. I think the only state, no, actually North Dakota is represented. Go to every state.
Yeah. So what's represented here is we have data that goes all the way back to the school year 2010 and 2011. So what's represented here is since that time, where do all of our students go? So of course, if we were to switch the year on this,
Which PS, super excited for Tableau 2018. We're still on 10.5 in our district.
Yes.
2018, you can program in some animation that just does stuff for you.
yeah.
But as you move through the years, you can see where our kiddos go
Yeah.
and how it's different.
Right.
Okay. So I will show you the last 2 years, and then we're going to quickly go to who goes to college.
Right.
So since this is a landing page, you can navigate in a couple of ways. You can use these guys. Oh, snap, I'm not going to do that. We have Server, it's published on Server, and it's a link to the dashboard in Server.
So you just use the tabs.
So I will use the tabs. So who goes to college? Let's take a look. So for us, in 16, I'm going to change it for a second. I'm going to go back to all years, and then we'll talk about specific graduating classes in just a second. But for us, over the last 7 graduating classes, excluding the class of 2018, we've graduated just over 25,000 students, which is right here in the top left. We then break it out by how many students graduate per school. Our biggest high school, where Norm's daughter Drew went, has graduated 5,800 students over the last 7 graduating classes, and then it goes from there. This school, Endeavor Academy, is an alternative education campus that has been set up to really support students that are struggling in various ways to get to high school graduation. So they do intentionally serve fewer
Right.
students.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Well, what I was just going to point out too, and I'm pretty sure Christina was about to get there, but was as you look at these numbers across the top, what's underneath it is the percentage of students from each of our schools who actually go on to college. And so Cherry Creek High School is really our flagship high school.
Yep.
And so they tend to not just graduate more students, but also send more students off to college. So when you look at that right now, since 2011, 85% of their graduates actually went on to college, if I'm reading that right.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So then what we have next to that, our high school, sort of our high school summary stats, is the average ACT score for students. So I was able to add in our warehouse, we have, in the state of Colorado, we've mandated ACT for the last, it hasn't been mandated for the last 3 years, but for each of these graduating classes, they were mandated to take ACT. So the majority of students have an ACT score. And what you can see is that the ACT score for students who enrolled in college is about 4 points higher than those who didn't. Then down below that, you can see college enrollment rates. And this is just enrollment. Do they ever go, right? Just addressing our first question, do they ever go? This is college enrollment here by ACT score. Shockingly, we've had a few kids that have a near perfect do have a perfect ACT score, but only 94% of them ever attend college. Then down below on the left, what we have is representation by race and ethnicity. So the bars represent the percent of students within the graduating class that fall within that demographic group. And the hexagons represent the percent of students within the kids that attend college that are fall within that demographic group. Red hexagons represent underrepresentation, and gray hexagons represent overrepresentation. And then what you have is kind of how long to first enrollment. So the majority of our kids enroll within 1 year of graduating, if they ever enroll. And then we have a small percent of kiddos that enroll after 4 years. My hypothesis is that these are our kiddos who are maybe taking advantage of the GI Bill and have gone and served. And then the average length of time to first enrollment is 0.24 years, which is essentially the summer months, right?
So as Christina was going through the different visualizations there, I hope you noticed that as she hovered over, there was a little tooltip that showed up, and we're very intentional of putting actual statements in there that describe to the user what they're actually seeing and what those bars and hexagons, those visualizations represent, right? So it's kind of helping that interpretation of the data itself on the workbook.
Right. Okay, so we have a sense now that we have minority students that are underrepresented amongst the group of students that ever attend college. Now the question is, where do our kids go? Any guesses? I'll bet you guys a steak dinner that you can't guess where our kids go. Colorado, yeah, exactly. So the majority of our kids stay within the state of Colorado. So of our 72.1% of graduates that enroll in college, the majority of them enroll in Colorado. Okay. So up at the top we have college enrollment rates. So again, it ties back to our first dashboard, really following some of those guided analytical or analytics principles. And the green number here on this dashboard becomes the black number here, right, the big number. You have a representation of where your kids go geographically. And then you also have a representation down at the bottom right of institution details. So the majority of our kids, 3 out of 4 kids from Cherry Creek, their first enrollment occurs at a 4-year institution, so college or university. And then almost 85% of our kids enroll in a public institution for their first time. And then we have college going rates by ethnicity. And this is where it started to get really interesting for me as the developer, as I was building this, and then as I've been speaking with folks in our district, like our counseling coordinator and others. This was not the hypotheses I had. I hypothesized that our lowest college going rate would be for African American students, and in fact, it's not. So our lowest college going rate is for Hispanic students. 61.9% of our Hispanic students ever attend college. If I click on this is an action filter, and you can see it changed both my institution details down at the bottom and my hex map. And really, what kind of blew me away as I was building this was the college going rate for Hispanic males, which is 57%. And you can see that the map changed quite a bit. We lose some of the US. We also see a really different profile for institution details. So most of our Hispanic students, right, 2 out of 5, their first college enrollment is at a 2-year institution. You can see that down here. And if I click here, this is also an action filter, and you can take a look. And the majority of our kids, our Hispanic students, attend 2-year colleges in Colorado. And if I click, it'll tell me what those institutions are. Okay. So we have 391 students that attend the Hispanic students, or Latino students, that attend the Community College of Aurora, which is a public 2-year institution. It gives me their mean or average ACT score, and then from the dashes, so there's no ACT score available from the college scorecard for the Community College of Aurora, but if there was one, it would give you the midpoint. So, okay. Click back on my map, click on my charts, and I can take these action filters off. So what happens? What happens to our students? Do they persist, right? Thinking about that graphic we put up earlier, do they persist and do they finish? Okay, so what happened? So across our last 7 graduating classes, 1 in 4 of our students have graduated. Now the caveat to that is this dashboard is one that it's maybe not so fair to look at all of the graduating classes together, because there is a component in which time is required. Kids need time to get through school. So let's look at our oldest graduating class, our class of 2011. So amongst our graduating class of 2011, 55% of our kids have graduated, okay? Amongst those who have graduated, the majority have earned bachelor's degrees. So again, you'll notice that the tooltips are very, very intentional. They're set up in a sentence format to promote usership. We have a few kids that have earned a master's degree. We have a few more kids that have earned an associate's degree. And this is my favorite. We have 3 kiddos that have earned a doctor's. So that could be a JD, an MD, a PhD, whatnot. You can see then that the average length of time to graduation by institution type. So it's just, it's 3 years, or just over 3 years for kids who first enroll at a 2-year institution. And then it's actually kids who enroll in a 4-year institution are a little bit more on time. It's just over 4 years. You can see that there is a difference between college graduates and those who haven't graduated in ACT score. So another 4-point difference, right? Then you have students not yet graduated by institution type. And then you have persistence by institution type. So you have, what you see is that most kids that don't have a degree, they persisted for between 1 and 2 years, right? So there are 16.1% of students, or 104 students for this graduating class who have not graduated have an enrollment length of 1 year. And that's calculated by taking their first college enrollment date and doing a date diff with their last college enrollment end date in the National Student Clearinghouse data. Okay. And then on the right, what you have, these are also action filters, but this is where some really kind of shocking things happen for me, right?
Yep.
The books represent college enrollment, or ever enrolling in college. The caps represent graduating.
Right.
Where do you guys see the biggest gap? Black. Okay.
Right.
So going back to this guy, right? It wasn't our Black or African American students that had the lowest college going rate, but they have the biggest gap. Meaning,
So there really is a question then, is it enrollment in college, right? Or is it persistence, or is it actually graduating from a college, right? And depending on what data you're looking at, somebody can say, well, we're not doing a good job with our Hispanic students because not many of them are actually getting into college. And that is even more kind of relevant because they're actually our second highest demographic in our district overall, right? So that brings up one conversation. But then when we look at this, it's like, okay, we're getting percentage-wise more of our Black students into college, but they're not graduating, right? They're getting enrolled, but they're actually not finishing. And in some cases, are they truly persisting, right? So then that brings that question is, were they really truly prepared for success, right? And what, in terms of our system, what could we have done better to prepare them to succeed, at least in terms of leaving college with a degree?
right? So again, you can take a look. These are action filters. So if I click, we can see then that what's really shocking is sort of this gap between enrollment and graduation for African American males is really big. And then you can also see kind of the degrees that these students earn. 25% of them, of these students, or 98 students, have earned a bachelor's degree. Another portion have earned associate's degrees. Okay. Right. Oops. Sorry. So that takes care of that. So then, one of the things that came up in some of our staff meetings were, what are the longitudinal trends, right? So we can go through and look at class by class, but overall, what's happening? So this guy takes a look at longitudinal trends. So on your x-axis, you have your graduating classes. Right now, the metric that is being displayed is ever attends college or ever attempts college. And you can see for the district as a whole, something really interesting happened here. There was kind of this drop-off in college attendance between the class of 12 and the class of 13. So before that, it was about 3 out of 4 kids ever attempt college. Now it's closer to 2 out of 3,
Right.
and has been for the last 5 graduating classes.
And the thing, though, to keep in mind is that the National Student Clearinghouse data is not static, right? Every time
Right.
you get a new file, what you get from the National Student Clearinghouse is you'll get a data set, and if they identify a student that shows up in a college, and that student might have graduated from our high school 3 or 4 years ago, if that student shows up in college, they get added to our data file, right? So when we feed that data file into our system, these numbers might change. They're not going to be static as you go from year to year.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah, when we get our report back from National Student Clearinghouse, it's typically about 70%. They give us about a 70% match. Yeah, so there's this set of kids that we don't know where they went, and it's either that they didn't go to a college.
Right.
We know that anyone that goes into a military institute, like if you go to West Point or the Naval Academy, they're not part of the National Student Clearinghouse, so they don't subscribe to those services. So we have some students that actually go into military institutions. They don't show up. So yeah, but we do get about a 70%. Is that what you tend to get with yours as well? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Right.
That goes back to that slide that we had where there was
It's our
the black box.
black box
We don't know. And
Yeah.
no, they actually are included in these
Right.
calculations.
Right. So when we talk about who graduates and then who goes on to college and we give that percentage, they're part of the denominator. But and then when we look at some of these other dashboards, we're really looking at the kids who are actually in college and then do they persist and do they graduate? So.
I want to restate what you're saying. You're saying you might have undercounted somebody in an app.
Yes. So.
But they're in the denominator.
They're in the denominator,
Yeah.
but they're not showing up as and so with that it's a little tricky, right? And so in the past we had a map and we could map everyone else out, and I would always notice that West Point was missing, right? And there's a story behind that on some guy that went to West Point, and then he was saying, yeah, when I was younger, when I was at West Point, we used to go up to Sarah Lawrence and we'd dance with the girls.
Oh, Norm.
And I was like, okay, how far is West Point from Sarah Lawrence? Because my daughter's going to Sarah Lawrence,
No,
and it
Norm.
wasn't showing up on the map. Yeah, so that was the only way I found out that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So then you can also disaggregate or look at it by school, so you can control the line display. The other things, just quickly, and then I want to pivot to Q&A, is you can take a look at whoever graduates from college. So this is a more fair representation, right? Because the kiddos from the class of 14, the class of 15, 16, and 17, they shouldn't have necessarily graduated, right?
Not yet.
Not yet, if they're attending a four-year institution. And then really to compare apples to apples, one of the things that we added in was attends college within 1 year, right? Because that is a fair comparison. The kids in the class of 11 have had more opportunity to ever attend college. So if you really want to look at attending college, if you really want to look at apples to apples, then you need to start to look at things like attending within 1 year. And you can quickly see trends emerging, right? Norm had indicated that Cherry Creek High School is our flagship high school, and here it is. It has the highest college attendance rate within 1 year of college, or within 1 year of high school graduation. You can also look at different demographic variables to see trends that emerge. So this was really interesting to look at how students of color perform or attend college within 1 year compared to white students. And then you can also throw gender on the rows. So do you want to add anything, Norm?
No, we want to leave some time for questions. I
Okay.
think there's a lot of other digging that we can do with this, but we have about 10 minutes left and I'd like to take some more questions. Yes, sir? Yes. Yeah, so we do give provide all of our 11th graders an ACT test. So the ACT, as Christina mentioned, used to be the state assessment for 11th graders in Colorado. That went away about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And as a community, there's a big pushback from our community saying, we value the ACT. SAT is okay, but we still value the ACT. So what we did as a district is we said, we'll foot the cost for that. So every one of our 11th graders gets both a state-mandated SAT now, and then they get the ACT, which we administer in our district.
And
so that's the
10th
only other
graders
measure.
get the pre-ACT.
Yeah, and then we also have AP. For K-8, yeah, that's all that we have really as a common assessment. And then again, they're designed according to the state to measure college readiness or college readiness at those grade levels. So it's our proxy, I guess, for for college readiness that we use in K-8, or at least 3 through 8 from the state. Yes, sir.
Do you do any outcome measurements for your younger grade levels? So like, if I want to teach your new district, you look at like how the elementary grade levels, what their outcomes look like in high school, and then provide them that sort of thing?
I think that's something that we're getting to.
It's coming.
Yeah, and you know, and we're having really these discussions. Just that's a little bit of a reason why we're late. We're talking with these other people about, you know, about K-12 and higher ed, but really in our district, trying to create this real P20 kind of analysis of and tracking of our data, really from preschool all the way through, you know, 12th grade and into college. And there are, you know, we are having these discussions of, especially when we talk about opportunity, right? Kids getting into AP and IB, it's
Yeah.
like if they're not ready for that, which is the argument that high schools might make, it's
Yep.
like, why are they not ready, right? So you push that conversation down into the middle school, and the middle schools are saying, well, you know, they're not getting what they need. Then you push it down to the elementary school. So we're really starting to have these conversations about what are we doing as educators at the elementary level that are, or what structures are
Yeah.
currently in place that are not allowing these kids to be on that same trajectory as other kids in terms of having access to these higher courses.
So is that like a metric you guys in your discussions have planned on is success for like a K-8 would be getting them into those, you know, AP, IB, those sorts of courses?
Yeah, actually, we've been having these discussions, and over the last couple of weeks. We have a new superintendent, and one of the things he challenged us with is, you know, I need to have measurable objectives. So that fell into our lap,
Yep.
into our office's lap. And one of the things that we did say was that, you know, we're going to reduce the disproportionality of students enrolled in AP/IB at the high school level. In our state, we submit course level data to the state, and we have to classify these courses as remedial, general, or advanced enrichment. And so at the middle school level, we use those categories, and
Yeah.
then we look at the disproportionality of enrollment in that. And then one of the things that we're kind of using as a proxy at the elementary level was GT identification, right? Because it's when you talk about disproportionality, the percentage of white Asian kids identified for giftedness, it's really big. And one thing we did notice was we were using an assessment the past couple of years as a screener, and we were getting in our I would say our high income schools, we're getting about 60% of second graders being identified for GT programming. Well, we changed the assessment last year, something that we felt was a little less biased, and we worked with the Advanced Academic Services Office on this. We administered this new assessment this year. We got about, what was it, like, instead of getting 60%, we got something like 20%
Yeah,
of the second
much
graders
lower.
in that same school were identified. So, you know, just seeing that, there was something going on with this test that might have been a little biased in identification.
So, and then the other way in which I really want to address this in a pointed way is we shared our state assessments with our high school principals this fall.
Right.
And immediately a hand goes up and says, so can you build this? We want this. So one of the things that we are actually in the process of building is, we're calling it an intervention dashboard, but it's really looking at our kiddos up to high school, sort of where they land when they're coming into high school. So we've had our first guiding coalition meeting to start that, to really get stakeholder buy-in, and I would not be surprised if by winter break there's a tool in Tableau that becomes available to them. Yeah, Peter. Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked that question, because that was something Norm and I were talking about as we were walking up here. He's like, you know, we have AP data, we have IB data, we have this data, we have that data. So To this point, we haven't, but I would not be surprised if, you know, when we go home next week, I start to tie in some of those other data points. The other data point that came up was GPA. So really beginning to look at some of these things that maybe, or ninth grade math performance, right? So performance in their ninth grade math course, to begin to look at how we can more proactively support, intervene.
Yeah, and you know, making dashboards and looking at them and playing around with them is a lot of fun, but really there has to be some sort of actionable reaction to it. And
Right.
And one of the things that we were talking about it, and before we got here, we were actually talking with a representative from higher ed, and one of the things he shared with us is that in the last maybe 10 years, what he's seen is an increase in the percentage of students who are getting college credit in high school before they actually enroll in college. And I think he said, yeah, it started about 4%, and then now it's up to, I think, maybe 30%. And, you know, so, you know, you're talking with somebody like that in higher ed at a Tableau conference. So, of course, he's talking about how he's analyzed that data, right? And what he's saying is that those kids with college credit tend to graduate earlier, of course, because they've got the credits, but they just do a little bit better, right? And so, you know, it's evidence like that to say, look, we see the disproportionality in our enrollment in APIB amongst different groups of kids, right? Here's the evidence that access to those courses not just predict that you're going to get into college, but actually predict that you're going to graduate, right? And so for us as a system, with that kind of evidence and this kind of data, to say, look, if we're not fixing this now, then we're not really preparing all of our students, inclusive excellence, right? We're not preparing all of our students for success as they leave our system.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I wouldn't be surprised if more stuff appears here that gives us some indication of, you know, what are potential intervention points or support points.
And so we have shared this with our counselors, and this is another thing that's new, right? In Colorado, we have educator effectiveness. Our teachers are held to not just not just their practice in the classroom, but also the success of the students, and in most cases, it's based on test scores, right? And our counselors are held to the kind of same standards. They don't really have a metric. So this is something that really, in a lot of our high schools, their primary goal is to get their kids, you know, enrolled in college. And, you know, when I was sitting with a counselor, my daughter was there, my wife was there, and we're kind of talking about where she should go, what she's interested in. And I remember the counselor behind her was this big map of the United States, and she had these pins in different colleges in different states, and she had numbers attached to it. And I was like, wow, you know, we're actually starting to do something like this, where we can tell you, and you can look for yourself where you're actually sending your kids, right? And this is the other thing, we haven't associated these students with their counselors yet. We don't have that in our system. But if a counselor can go in and say, okay, I work with the kids from A through N. I think that's how our high school was set up.
Yeah, they do it alphabetically.
Yeah, then I can track to see in Cherry Creek, where did these kids end up going, and what percentage of them actually went into college. So it's just a whole new metric for them. Got 1 minute. Then they shut my microphone off. Any other questions? Right. Yes, sir. We plan to. I think there's a lot of student data, right? And one of the things that we're trying to push out more, at least on our website, is taking Tableau and publishing it at least on our district website, so that our community can see this, right? And this is definitely one of those that we had a public version out. We haven't kind of publicized it, but I think we do want to start to bring more stakeholders in and say, okay, here are the metrics. And this is especially true now with our new superintendent, because one of the things that he did say to our board is, I want to be held accountable to very specific metrics, right?
Yep.
And this is certainly one that we can say as a system, are we doing well with our students, right? And he wants to be transparent with this, so we're pushing out our state assessment data in Tableau. on our district website, and then I think the plan is to have something like this shared out as well. I mean, the state could do this too in Colorado. You guys have access to some of the clearinghouse data. Yes? Are we communicating that out? We have that with our local colleges and universities. So we get a remediation report, and it does give us information within the state of the percentage of our students who had to take remedial courses in college because they weren't ready to, for the regular core courses. We haven't had that with the national universities, anything outside of Colorado yet. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and this is where, when I was talking with a higher ed guy, I was a little envious because they have access to all of that, right? And so they're actually able to analyze all that data because that's part of the application process in the colleges. We have some information in Naviance, which is our college preparation kind of platform. We haven't really tapped into that data yet, and then some of that data, it's hand entered, so it might not be as clean as we want. And then just income data is always sensitive data to kind of get access to, but I agree with you. You can create some proxies for income based on neighborhoods. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's ways that you can use the geocoding to kind of get like some median income between certain neighborhoods or things like that. Yeah. Okay, you guys are at -3 minutes. So thank you very much. Great questions.